Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. My name is Danielle, and welcome to No Violence for Kids Canada. We've been having these weekly chats every week on topics that are related to parenting and reducing parenting violence. And tonight we are going to be talking about punishment. So, probably the biggest topic and most important topic, and we'll probably do more punishment videos and chats. It is important that we acknowledge our work is number one for the kids, because we know that parenting without violence is the most effective way to parent, but most of all, that children have rights to live free and safe from violence, and they also have rights to dignity and all the other articles of the Children's Rights Convention, the Convention for Child Rights. So I just want to acknowledge, too, that I am here in Surrey, British Columbia, which is the stolen land of the Kwantlen Nation. It is a part of the Coast Salish territory, so I'm just along the Pacific Ocean. So that's really important to me. I believe in their truth, I believe in their story, and I'm a committed Canadian on reconciliation. I do, my commitment is really in reducing violence, like I said, so really pushing and urging for an answer from the Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action number 6, which is to repeal Section 43 of our Criminal Code of Canada, the spanking law. We're not looking for a revision. We actually just want a full repeal. It should not be in our criminal code at all. So we have very clear line there. Actually out with the corporal punishment altogether. There is no loopholes. We don't need any discussion, just no violence. It's that simple. So we're going to get started. And I am super excited because we have two fantastic people to join us today. So here we are. We have, this way, Mandy Moonland and Andrea. So Mandy, please introduce yourself, and then Andrea, and then we'll get ready and start our questions.
All right. Thank you for having me. My name is Mandy, and I've been on the peaceful parent journey for about 8 years, maybe a little bit longer. I started off as an authoritarian parent. I did spanking. I did all of the, putting them in the corner and in the naughty chair and all of those things, trying to figure it out. I have 3 boys. I have a 27-year-old, an 18, and a 12-year-old now. So we've transitioned from very authoritarian parenting style to the peaceful parent. And it has, just changed our lives. Our connections, our relationships are absolutely amazing. And it's been a wonderful journey to go down. So I'm passionate about this topic, and I could talk about it all day. So thanks for having me.
Excellent. So glad you're here. This is exactly what we want to hear. Andrea.
Before I talk briefly about myself, I will just say that I would also like to acknowledge the land of which I am on. I am currently living in Toronto, and like our multicultural city, our traditional territory is multicultural and home of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And I'm so grateful to be living and working on this land. And so I'm Andrea, and I am a fierce advocate for repeal as well. Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action number 6. I believe wholeheartedly that children should, in fact, live in a world free from violence, and it is entirely possible. There is so much science and research out there that tells us that we can parent without force, and it's going to take time and hard work to break these cycles, but it is wholly possible, and it starts with changing the law and repealing Section 43 for that definitive top down from our government that says, no, you can't hit your kids.
No way, Jose. No loopholes, bottom lines. So glad that you're both here. And it's our first time with Mandy Moonland as our guest. And Andrea and I are here in Canada. And Mandy is where?
I'm in Texas, in the States, in the United States.
Well, see, this is all over Turtle Island, the US, Canada, and I'll put it out there to all you Australians, our big continents that are leaders of the developing world. Us 3 are in a race. Who will ban corporal punishment first? So let's just get busy on having the race. That's what I say.
A little healthy competition.
It's a little healthy competition. I'll bet you $1 That's about as much money as I have. So that feels great. Okay, let's go. We have a list of questions. They are in the description below, as well as information about our guests today and more information about the repeal. If you're interested, please do contact us, like us, follow, subscribe. That's what YouTube is supposed to say. And I'm not really a YouTuber. I'm just trying to do this just to talk about getting the repeal. So here we go. This is question number 1. And so I think what we can do is just go through. We'll go to Mandy. We'll go to Andrea. I'll summarize. We'll go to the next question. So what is punishment, Mandy?
Well, for me, I would break it down to say that punishment is something that is used to make people suffer and to oppress people. And if we break it down even further to what the punisher is, and we train parents to be punishers, so we're training them to be in the act of being an oppressor and of making people suffer, especially little people. So I think that's the gist of it. It's oppression and it's manipulation and coercion and suffering.
Yeah, I agree. My thought process was very similar in that thinking. You know, what is punishment? Punishment is control, and the reality is that we can't control other people, and this is why punishments inevitably fail, because they don't work, because we cannot control other humans. That's what punishment is to me. Yeah, exactly the same lines. Punishment is control.
Oh my goodness. Both of you are talking about such keywords. I am so grateful, Mandy, that you mentioned oppression, right? If we look at the history of punishment back in the dawn of time, since Enlightenment, it was always about the ship of fools and punishment, and thinking that was a teaching tool, or it was used for people that weren't productive in society, that couldn't add to the economy. So punishing them was supposed to teach them something into, be better workers. And so oppression, I think when I think about justice and the big lens of justice, oppression is so important that you brought that up. And then thinking about, you used the word coercion, like bingo, nailed it. Control, suffering. I would say that punishment is also seen as a form of teaching, right? So people that, kind of that blindness of not knowing better, that they believe that they're teaching, that when people feel revenge or hurt, that you use punishment to make people feel bad, and that will change their behavior. And I think that's a big thing with a lot of parents. They just think that that's how you teach. So yeah, we'll let people in the comments, or we can all kind of, chew on that for a while, because traditionally that punishment is a teaching method. Any final thoughts on what is punishment?
Oh, I think we nailed it.
Look at us. We're pros. Okay. Next question. Mandy, does punishment
change behavior? Well, yes, it does. But we have to ask if that behavior change is healthy or if it's putting them in survival mode. So we have plenty of neuroscience out there, plenty of research out there showing that, it damages the developing brain, and it takes people out of their executive functioning. So you can't make, great choices when you're not in your executive functioning. And children are just trying to figure it out and learning, and their brains aren't even fully developed yet. We feel, that making them suffer and hurting them will somehow make it better for them or better for us. And it just, if you really think of it logically, it doesn't make any sense. So we really have to think outside of the box and do that self-evaluation, really look at our values of what is happening here, because what we're doing is not, it's not healthy in the society.
Yeah. For me, when I was thinking about this question, does punishment change behavior? Yes. The first thing I think is that the child, coming off what you're saying, Mandy, is that the child becomes fearful. That is that they act out of fear, and when the fear isn't present, do they have that change? So I think the behavior change can be limited in that sort of immediacy. But then we also have the long-term behavior change. And what you have is you have that child now growing up and thinking that punishment is an acceptable way of controlling others, and they don't learn the fundamentals of conflict resolution or problem solving through respect and collaboration.
So important to recognize. I think that really nails it, right? So yeah, I agree. It changes behavior for sure, but going back to what you said, Mandy, is what is our goal though? How do you behave differently when you're fearful, scared, angry, as compared to when you respect somebody, right? And I think that's what came up when I was thinking about this question is a lot of times we hear, well, they should respect, this is teaching respect. And there's this big confusion on what actual respect is and what fear is. So it's almost like some people feel like, when you're scared of somebody, you respect them. And I would argue that when I respect somebody, I behave a lot differently with them than when I'm afraid of somebody or when I'm angry at somebody. So yeah, it absolutely changes behavior. And what is our goal? Right?
Right.
Absolutely. It's such a powerful way of thinking, about it. Yeah, it changes behavior. It works in the short term. Maybe. Does it work? What is working?
It's very lazy and convenience. It's a very lazy way of being. It's a very convenient thing because you get things done immediately. You don't have to take the time out to problem solve and collaborate and have real conversations and be deep with people. It's a very superficial way of living. And I just urge people to go into a more sacred and deep relationship with their children. And it doesn't have to be the way it is. If you're punishing or hitting or shaming or yelling or anything, it doesn't have to be that way. And it's so much easier once you get the hang of it. Once you deal with the inner stuff and knowing your values, it's so much easier to have these types of relationships.
So much easier. So let's talk a bit about it. I know you touched a bit, Mandy, already around executive functions and all of that. What else are the risks of using punishment?
Well, punishment undermines your connection to your children. And so, if we don't have connection, we don't have a lot of influence. We don't have the true respect that we need for guidance. So even when I was a child, like people that I didn't truly respect or I didn't feel a connection with, they didn't have any real influence over me. I mean, I may have pretended in their presence that they did, but I was out doing all the things I wanted to do. I found myself in some really risky situations that probably children shouldn't have been in, but my parents were the last people that I was going to call, So, and I found that too with my oldest son, when I was authoritarian parenting, I was probably the last person that he would run to when he had a problem or he, needed me. And so having a different relationship with my younger children, and I have a wonderful relationship now, like I really owned my stuff and apologized to my older son and, told him like, we're changing. And this is like, when we know better, we do better. And that's what we're going to do. And it even changed the relationship with my adult son. So this concept can be taken even into adult relationships. It doesn't have to be just children, but I really think that it undermines and is very risky to lose your connection to your children because you need to be there for them. And they need to know that when they have a problem or they have something that they've gotten in trouble in or they've made a mistake, that you are the person they call. You are the person that they run to for advice.
Absolutely. Andrea?
Sorry. Why is punishment risky for children? I think I might have sort of answered this already a little bit, but it's risky because it is that quick fix. You're not building those life skills, those collaborative conflict resolution life skills. It's external motivation as opposed to teaching them internal motivation, right? Through that connection that you're talking about, Mandy. And additionally, when children act out of fear, they're more prone to lying and other negative behaviors like aggression, because punishments are not positive, they're negative. And they often come from a place of aggression when we're punishing someone, again, because we're trying to control them, to coerce them, to oppress them. So this is risky for children because this is what they're learning. They learn through observation. So this is what they're directly learning from us.
100%. 100%. And I think it's just key what you're talking about is that connection, because when that's broken and severed and kids learn through punishment and pain and suffering and oppression, it has a plethora of outcomes, right? So disconnection and attachment creates that internalization that the child thinks that they're bad, not the behavior. They don't see that you're talking about behavior when they're in pain and shamed by their parent. They think that they themselves are a bad person. And then it teaches them, like you said, to use violence as a problem-solving method. It's also physically dangerous for their brain. So studies have shown more gray matter in children that have been physically assaulted, or adults. We know this, brain injury, but also just how the brain grows and develops at such a young age. The risk is so high that children will have mental illness, ADHD, ODD, all of these other things that are really on the rise already because of the stress in our world. So we have to really look at the outcomes in the bigger picture. I also think about the risks of using punishment when we think about people in prisons, and using the recidivism rate of people that have been, incarcerated, and there's been punishment on them. It shows there's higher recidivism rates. So they do repeat crimes when they're not respected. When people are oppressed, it's more likely that you're going to see a higher rate of criminality and less engagement in civics and being a participatory citizen. We also see situations where there's mistrust of authority at all. And that's a dangerous place, right? To put kids in, not trusting the adults in their world. That kind of brings back to that connection again. I know there is zero evidence that shows that physical punishment has a positive effect on children. Hundreds of studies have proven it and proven that it's not effective. There has been zero studies that are peer-reviewed, valid, and evaluated research that shows any effectiveness. So that's pretty giant to think about, how much research has been done to try to find the goodness in it. Zero, none.
It's interesting, Danielle, that you talk about how when children don't respect their parents, they also seek alternate people to go to when they need, help and advice. And oftentimes, I read somewhere that a lot of children are going to their peers. And the fact of the matter is that peers, they don't have the appropriate knowledge or skills to be advising children on hard emotional topics because they have yet to experience these things. And so parents have the experience and knowledge, but what we're doing is we're creating that disconnection where we don't let our children come to us, and then they seek that from others, peers, which I don't think is helpful.
Right.
And learning, morals and how to be in the world, because they're still figuring it out themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. We could even take it a step further. And there's plenty of research that shows that adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs scores, kind of flow into that, but it also causes disease. And, you're more likely to have asthma, you're more likely to have diabetes, heart disease, neurological disorders. Gabor Mate has a wonderful book out called The Myth of Normal. And he talks about this extensively throughout all of his work and all of his books, about how the way we treat children and how society is set up to be oppressive sets everyone up for elements. And we can see it, it's in front of our face. It's here. I mean, we can see, Rome is falling. We're not in a good situation.
Wow.
Our health is failing, so it can go on and on and on, but we have to, at some point, step back and say, what are we doing? It's time for change. It's time to evolve.
And I think that's it exactly. Is thank you for mentioning The Myth of Normal and Gabor Mate's book. He's from right here in Vancouver. So been
I love
following
him. He's one of my heroes.
Me too. Me too. And I think it's really important to recognize what you're saying, right? So, in summary, we recognize that physical punishment puts children and the whole society at risk for ill psychological health, emotional health, social health, and physical health. So, it's not just one thing or another. And I want to also summarize this, is a lot of parents will say, or a lot of adults will say, well, I was hit and I was okay. And the thing is that it comes up for me is recognizing that temperament and the situation, the moment the child's in of their development, we can't predict that outcome. The risks are just too high. And that's such an important piece, right? To recognize that maybe the child, you were okay because you had all these protective factors on the other side of the ACEs scores. You had maybe community, you were involved, you had good social care, you didn't have a parent who had high substance use. So all of these protective factors will minimize, the risk. However, when it comes to the physiological brain, we can't predict that. It's just too dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's so important what you're saying about the outcomes in society in general, higher crime rate, and all of the things that just hitting kids or adverse childhood experiences, I guess, engages in or promotes. I don't know the right word.
Yeah. And we really have to ask ourselves too, are we really okay? Like, we have all these addictions. We have drugs that have like that stigma of addiction, but like, what are we like? A lot of people emotionally eat. We smoke cigarettes. We, do all kinds of things to numb ourselves and numb the pain from emotional needs that weren't met as children. So, it comes up in everyday relationships, everyday conversations, your relationships with your coworkers, your spouse, your children, every aspect, it affects everything, whether you think it does or not. So, yeah.
Amazing. Totally true. Do you have anything final to add there, Andrea? I can see your brain going.
No, I'm a child of being spanked. And I used to have that exact statement. I turned out okay, but upon real deep reflection, not quite sure I did. My therapist would say otherwise.
Right. Yeah, makes so much sense. Next question, Mandy. What is the difference between, it's down there, punishment and discipline?
Well, we covered punishment, so that is, oppression and suffering. And discipline is, I like to think of it, it kind of comes off the word disciple or discipleship. And when you're a disciple, you're not afraid of who, is discipling you. And it's someone that you love and you care about, that you respect and that you want to be with and you want to connect with. And so I feel like that is a huge difference. It's a partnership. It's not a dictatorship. So
nice.
Let's see. Yeah, we did talk about punishment, but I love it. I don't love it. I love talking about it. Love talking about it and is trying to make things better. But punishment again. Yeah, it's control, force. It's often coming from a place of desperation. I think you don't know what else to do, and so it's this aggressive, desperate thing to do because there's no other way that's known. And this is the culture that we are living in, and we don't know other ways. And discipline, discipline is to teach, it's to guide, it's to model behavior. I know my children are watching my every move. I need to be the person that I hope to see in them. And I certainly don't want my children to go around punishing others because they don't get what they want.
No?
Yeah.
I think we have a little bit of an echo. Exactly. Discipline to me means to teach. It also is procedural in a way. So it's about having self-discipline on some process. So maybe it's being mindful in breath or your pacing or your proximity. But it is about being your best teacher, about being a leader. And it's very non-hierarchical. So to me, discipline is very collaborative. It's super transparent and predictable. And having that trust that no matter what, there's going to be that we're going to reflect on our own behavior. So discipline to me is very about ourselves. When I think about parents, it's about, hey, what are you doing in the moment, right? It's more about the parent's behavior than it is about the child's behavior or teaching them a lesson of any kind. It's more about, what are you modeling in this moment of stress, and what skills do you have to problem solve? What is your toolbox, that you could, let's fill up your problem solving toolbox, your breath, your self-compassion in the moment. Because I think it's important to recognize, like where we've all talked about, right, that we can be really triggered by our kids, the way we were raised, and it can really set us off. And I think that's normal. It's normal to be frustrated and angry and sad in parenting, and to know where that sits in our body and be able to send love to that like that part of us that is still awakened by certain behaviors, and take a moment to just, I think discipline for me, the cornerstone of it is recognizing when we come alive inside and we want to be aggressive with the world and our children, and we don't know what to do. We become out of control. Discipline to me is becoming in control and sending love to the part of us that is crying out in that moment. I find that parents aren't yelling at their kids. They're just often yelling at themselves. When parents hit their kids, they're hitting themselves and their own story. So I think discipline is so much about ourselves. It's, yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. All right, next topic. Did we finish? Is that it? Oh, okay, hold on. What is positive? Okay, hold on. I'm going to go skip to this one. Mandy, is positive discipline passive and permissive, or permissive?
Well, I think that people can kind of get into the trap of being more passive and permissive when they don't have the tools and they don't know what to do. So yeah, I mean, I kind of found myself when I was a single mom with my first son, and I was very, very passive and permissive when I first had him, and he was kicking me and pulling my hair and all kinds of stuff, And then I met my husband, and he was like, "Oh, well, I know how to fix this." He brought the authoritarian in because that's how he was raised. That's how he knew. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't being a doormat. I was a people pleaser and all these things. So I really adopted that because I was like, oh, I feel empowered and I feel like I have some control here and I'm not a doormat. And then, we kind of progressed through that whole authoritarian paradigm of all throughout his childhood. From the time he was about 3 on until he left the house at 18. But yeah, I can see how people can get into that passive permissiveness, especially if they don't have the tools or they don't know what else to do, because they've never known any other way. So
yeah, exactly. I think the same too. I think it can be. And I think what's really happened here is this large sort of pendulum swing where you had this authoritarian type of parenting, and that was one way, that's your punishments, your force, your threats, your emotional and physical abuse. And what's happened is, those kids have their own kids and they go, well, that hurt me. I don't want to do that. So then they shift completely entirely to, permissive parenting. Because they don't want to control their children but they don't know how to set those limits and those boundaries respectfully because they've never learned it. And I think that's exactly what you were saying, Mandy, too. You don't have the tools, so you don't know how to set limits and boundaries. And now, I do believe that there is a shift happening, and we're sort of getting back into that middle ground of authoritative parenting, where we know how to hold the limits, to set our boundaries, while considering the child's point of view through collaboration. It's learning together. It's letting the child experience big emotions and being that calm you want to see in them without sending them away because I'm triggered. And I think that this is a big part of authoritative parenting, where we allow our children to experience those big emotions because they're not bad. And I can't remember what you were saying, it's like when I get that discipline, right, that frustration, and I think a big part of it is discipline is on the self, because ultimately we don't know how to deal with these big emotions because we were never given these opportunities as children to deal with our big emotions. And this is so important in changing that shift and becoming, respectful parents, is to feel ourselves and to give ourselves room for emotions and our children room for emotions. And, and I think even with permissive parenting, those big emotions, because they're hard to deal with, it's just like, well, here's the iPad, here's a toy, here's the thing that you want, because I don't know how to deal with those big emotions. Mm-hmm. So authoritative parenting is really, experiencing them, because they're all the human condition.
100%. And I love that you both have talked about, right, the authoritarian side, then the spectrum of permissive and passive in this question, and then bringing up authoritative. And when I think about that, I think again about oppression. So it comes back to, I'm all about justice. If folks don't know, I study justice, everything. And so I always think about that middle ground. What is the both sides of the story, and how do we care for both? And finding that messy middle. To me, positive discipline or positive parenting is a messy middle. It's accepting messiness. It's accepting that we're not perfect, and neither is our kids, but we can work through that together, and highlighting that idea that it's normal to have emotion, big, small, and it's normal to feel too controlling sometimes and out of control sometimes. But just normalizing, I guess it's the myth of normal again, Mandy, that was coming up in my head there. But I think that it is about justice. And I'm trying to move away from the word assertive, but it does come up so much in research. Like when we look at parenting research, assertive parenting is peaceful in society, assertive. And it does somewhat cringe me a little bit when I think about assertive meaning over somebody still. So there's something still hierarchical there, but at the same way, I think it's the best we got, I don't know. I would like to say too, like positive discipline too. I think discipline happens long before misbehavior. When parents have confidence and they are self-reflective, and when they recognize our own boundaries, and we're recognizing that lifelong journey of speaking to those boundaries in a compassionate way, I think that then we're in a really good position to be that leader in those moments. So to me, positive discipline is way before Johnny's not getting his shoes on. It's actually when we start being self-reflective and taking responsibility.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because I feel as an adult, I'm having to teach myself what it means to know and understand my boundaries, because I can't teach my children about boundaries if I don't know them, and I think, growing up, again, it was like we always had to do the nice thing, at the cost of personal suffering. And I think that this inhibits me from knowing myself and my boundaries. And so if I don't know about my own boundaries, like I said, how can I teach my children boundaries? And how can I know that line where I can hold that line with discipline if I don't know my boundaries, and I don't know where, I'm getting triggered, and how to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of us, most people, the way the society is set up, we have to fit in a box to survive the system. And so really any kind of parenting has a lot to do with the inner work, and like really knowing your values. And, I remember when I first started, I would like just automatically just say, hey, don't do that, or do this or whatever. And then I really had to like, okay, why can't he do that? Like, I had no explanation, it's like there was no other reason other than as the way it's always been. That's the only thing that I've ever known. But so, it's really thinking outside of the box, and like really pinpointing what really matters and what doesn't really matter. I think I've kind of set up a lifestyle with our family. Like, we try to find freedom in everything that we do. And we've even exited the school system because I mean, we believe that it's a oppressive system as well. So, you know, having to get permission to take my child on a vacation during the school year is not something I'm willing to get permission for from my government. So, so, you know, we've chosen the homeschool, or what we do is unschooling. But so it's just, you know, creating freedom and creating peaceful freedom for your kids and family. I think is just so important.
So important. We do have a comment. Thank you, Moondog. And I'll read the comment here. It says there is a make of short videos named Linnea Kea, and she lives in Australia. And she is always making videos about her mom using objects to hit her as a teenager. Most commenters praise her mom. It's just awful. Yeah, that sounds terrible. Thanks for the comment, though. Yeah, exactly. We don't want to praise that person, and we really feel bad for them that they're making videos about that. And that's very concerning, Moondog.
Yeah.
That literally makes my heart hurt.
And this is exactly why I advocate, and I will speak about this all the time, every day, if I have to.
Yeah, right. It's always disturbing, no matter how many times I hear about kids being hit. I literally, like, it triggers me. So I guess we all feel the same while we're here.
It wasn't very long ago, and, you know, husbands were allowed to hit their wives, you know. So we've seen some progress there. You know, at least we can call the police now and get some kind of protection. But I mean, it used to be normal for men to hit their wives. So I feel like it's due, you know, like it's due for our children to have protection as well.
Absolutely. And in Canada here, Mandy's in Texas for those that aren't, that maybe missed that, but in Canada, and the children are actually the only citizens in Canada that are allowed to be hit. So you're not allowed to hit an inmate. You're not allowed to hit an animal. You're not allowed to hit anybody else. But unless you're a child between the ages of 2 and 12, it's just ridiculous. So Mandy, what advice do you have for parents to use less punishment?
Oh, know your values. Really sit down and write your values down. Do you want your children to think that it's okay to solve problems through hitting or through yelling? Do you know, what kind of relationships do you want them to have in the future? What kind of, you know, like if they're going to have relationships when they're adults, do they think that, you know, stonewalling people or yelling at people or gaslighting people or manipulating people or oppressing people is something that's a normal part of a relationship? That's something that we have to think of long term. You know, it's not just I'm pissed off in this moment and I feel like I need to put out some aggression on this child. Like, what is the long term goal for how we want our children to have relationships and how we want them to know what love really is?
That's good advice.
So my advice to parents looking to use less punishment would be, you know, being on this YouTube channel is sort of the first step, you know. It's educating yourself on better ways to guide behavior, because the education and the research is out there to break cycles. You know, understanding a little bit of child development is helpful in behavior guidance. You know, that your children are never giving you a hard time, they're having one. Knowing yourself, your triggers, you know, this is what sort of Mandy was just talking about, you know, your triggers, your values, how you can manage your own stress response. And that goes back to what you were saying, Danielle, about discipline, you know, personal discipline, you know, managing your own stress so that you can be that regulated calm for your child so they learn those skills. And so then my biggest piece of advice to parents would be to prepare yourself for the hardest work you'll ever do.
Wow. That's very good advice. I agree. It is the hardest work of a lifetime to break generational cycles, to break parenting patterns. It's in our bones, it's under our skin, it's in our blood to do what we were raised to do. So I agree. It is the hardest work of a lifetime. I think my big advice, I like what you both said too, like check your values, check out any resources, accept that it's going to be hard. I also think that it's important to get help. You know, like reach out to resources that you trust and find somebody that you can practice strategies with. So some of the most effective things to do is just to role play with a friend a different way. Look at a situation. Is it bedtime? Is it brushing your teeth? When is these conflicts coming up? And address those particular situations and watch your child's face. Start increasing the amount of observation that you have with that eye contact and that connection. And soon enough, you're going to behave in a way that fosters the love and the freedom that you were talking about. So I think it's all about observing, but it takes practice. Find a friend, a partner, even your kids. Like, hey, I didn't like what happened yesterday between us. Can we practice together a variety of different ways to go about that? I can't say enough that I have a saying. There's lots of P's in what I say. So it goes like, patience is possible when parents practice procedures that solve problems. And then I say peace is possible when parents practice procedures that solve problems. And then the words that come up for me are people, power, punishment, and politics. So I think it's all about the P's, and I'm sure there's more P's that can go in there, but definitely practice.
Yeah. And ask your kids too. I mean, kids are more intelligent than we give them credit for. So, you know, we have family meetings, and if we have conflicts or like scheduling that's not working for everybody, like we bring it to the table and say, hey, what ideas do you have? How can we solve this? You know, and they come up with some brilliant ideas and we try it out. And if it doesn't work, then we try something else, you know? So again, it's all about collaboration and partnership. It's nothing to do with dictatorship.
100%.
Shifting that mindset. I think exactly what you're saying are, you know, our children are, they're very smart. And I'm studying early childcare education, and one of the things we're learning about is like the biggest overarching mind shift in pedagogy for early education is this idea that children are competent, they are capable, and they are rich in potential. And I think this is sort of it is the foundation to shifting the mindset to respecting them and bringing them into collaboration and bringing them into problem solving. And I think something else that I wanted to just quickly mention about this idea of problem solving, you know, I think, and this idea of, you know, knowing yourself and your triggers is, whose problem are we trying to solve? You know, just like that thing that you're talking about, Mandy, where you're like, I don't want you doing that. Well, whose problem is that? Is that my problem or is that my kid's problem? Mm-hmm. And then once you know whose problem it is, you're better equipped to solve it.
Yeah. 100%. I also want to just comment here. Thank you, Moondog. I see lots of comments here. Also mentioning another short video maker who did a video on how she expected, I'm echoing, her boyfriend's mom to start screaming. So it looks like another short. And then also asking, are all these parents borderline personality disorder? Well, I would argue that parents that are using punishment are definitely struggling with control and stress and influence and all of the external things that might make that connection difficult. I'm not a clinician in the way of diagnosis, so I don't know that. And then Moondog also said, have you ever heard of Lloyd DeMoose's stuff? No, I have not. Have either one of you heard of Lloyd?
But I'll write it down and I'm going to look it up.
Okay. Thank you so much, Moondog, for these great comments. And also thank you for all the typing. That's a lot of typing without any typos. I could never do that. So this has been really great. Is there any final thoughts about punishment or any takeaways, Mandy, that you want to talk about and let everybody know about your website? How can we get a hold of you?
My website is mandymoonland.com, and I help adults and some teens that do shadow work. So it's a type of inner work that kind of gets down to the emotional roots of, you know, our triggers and our behaviors and things like that. I also do peaceful parent coaching. I do self-directed learning coaching. So I have an array of support for you. We also do free parenting calls every other Friday. So it's all based in peaceful parenting. We get together and talk about our struggles and what are some solutions. And it's really like a parent helping parent situation. So like the parents just kind of help and support each other in their struggles and trying to find solutions to be more peaceful. And we also have a shadow work it's not as a deep session, but it's a public session for shadow work, just to kind of get an idea and some tools in your tool belt so that you can start kind of self-reflecting and figuring out, what direction you want to go to change your life and to have more freedom and peace. So,
yeah. I mean, that's a lot of work you're doing. So, Mandy, everybody is down in Texas. And so I'm not sure if you service people all over.
Yeah, all over.
All over? All
yeah.
right. Well, hopefully, Mandy, I did put the link down in the description of if anybody's looking to get a hold of Mandy, you can also go to www.mandymoonland.com. And maybe, Mandy, you can check in the description to make sure we've covered all of the things that you just described. And if not, just add those to the comments as well. And Andrea, any final thoughts? What have you been up to?
Final thoughts. Well, me personally, what I went up to is you can follow me on TikTok, Smash Up on 2. You'll find some more great parenting strategies and also my activism work for the repeal of Section 43. I post a lot of my videos on there about me hitting the streets, getting petitions signed, sending out senator letters, and just raising awareness of the bills going through legislation. So that's something. And then the other thing I'll just end with in terms of our conversation today, and it draws on a lot of what we've been talking about here, is that when it comes to punishment and when it comes to respectful parenting, and this draws on exactly what I'm learning in early childhood education, is connection is the most important thing. You said it, when you punish, you sever that connection. And that's okay. We're on a journey and we're learning, and you just repair that damage. You apologize and you come up with solutions together. Like I said, this is the hardest work you'll ever do, and just connecting with your child as much as possible, getting down on their level, and just being down on their level and just connecting with them is it's hard. It's not what we're used to. But it is how we positively guide behavior against the long journey. We're not talking about that immediate fix, which is a product of our culture. These quick behavior fixes is a product of our culture. We need to have that push button fix, that pill that that solves our problems immediately. And this is, I think, also draws on our culture has pushed us this way. I'm not super sure. I'm going to end it. Connection.
It sounds like there's an echo there a little bit. No, it's coming from me now. I don't know where, but I'm so grateful for both of you in this conversation today. And I think we could talk more about punishment, and we definitely will. I know next week our topic is patience, the holy grail of all things. I'm not sure for both of you, when you work with parents, probably the number one thing they all want is more patience. So what is patience? How do we get a hold of it? What does it even mean? How do we do it? And where do we buy that stuff anyway? So if we can, that's next week. And anyway, we're out there. We want to support all action and all activists that are out there to ban corporal punishment. There's some wonderful activism going down in the States. So thank you, Mandy Moonland, for being here. And I will be driving people to your page. Please follow us on No Violence for Kids in Canada on Facebook. We share lots of parenting advice and information and support. And also, the final word is this whole movement is about compassion. We're not here to condemn parents. We're not here to throw them in jail. We are actually here to promote more peace and more compassion overall. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.